everybody, welcome back to another edition of Homemade, and today we are going to be preparing a pineapple supreme cake. And you all, this cake, it is an old recipe, but it is still good. And the first thing that we're going to do is prepare our pineapple. Now, as you can see, I do have a fresh pineapple. If you don't have a food processor, or even if you don't feel like going through this step, then you're still able to do this with a can of crushed pineapples. It works just the same. All we're going to do is cut our pineapple into slices. So I'm going to go ahead, finish putting this in the food processor, come back, and I'll show you how the pineapples should look once you remove them. I like to take as much of the juice that I can because we're going to use that for a simple syrup. This is the finished result, and I would say this is about 2 to 3 cups but right now we're going to go ahead and head to the stove, and I'll show you how we're going to prepare our pineapples. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut our burner on medium to high heat. We are going to put in 1 full stick of real butter. So now our butter has melted enough. It's okay that it's not completely melted. We're going to go ahead and put in our pineapples. Put in our sugar. And for our cornstarch, we are just going to kind of sprinkle it in everywhere. You don't have to make a slurry with this or anything. I will add in our vanilla extract. We are going to cut our burner down, and we're going to cut it on medium heat, and this is just so our pineapples don't stick. Now, you won't have to consistently stir these, but you do need to stir them at least every 5 minutes. And when you're stirring them, make sure that you are running your spatula across the bottom of your pan, and that is the reason why you want to use a rubber or a wooden spatula. In this bowl, I have 2 cans of just regular evaporated milk. I'm going to go ahead and pour them into my boiler. Now, you do want a boiler that is large enough to hold your milk without it overflowing. In this bowl, I'm going to go ahead and put in 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. But before I put my cornstarch in, I'm going to go ahead and put in my tablespoon of vanilla flavor. And I'm going to be whisking that while I'm adding my cornstarch in because, again, you don't want any clumps from your cornstarch. So we will need to cook this until it thickens up to a desired consistency. So let's go ahead and head to the stove. Now I have my heat adjusted to medium to high heat. We may need to adjust that a little later. We're going to let this cook. And with this, unlike our pineapples, we will have to continually whisk this because we do not want it to stick. You can see our pineapples are done. And what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and remove them from the heat, and we're going to start the cooling process. I like to take them and pour them into a heat-proof container. Now, if you want to let them cool in the skillet, that is totally fine. We have cooked our milk, and again, it did cook for about 10 or 15 minutes. And right now, we're going to start the cooling process. And what I like to do with this is the same thing that I did with the pineapples. I like to just take them and pour it into a heat-proof container. So just to show you how simple it is, we are going to use our hand mixer. So let's go ahead and get started by creaming our 2 sticks of Imperial and our half cup of shortening. Go ahead and add in my 2 cups of sugar. I am going to add in my tablespoon of cake batter flavor and my tablespoon of vanilla flavor. So I'll put in half of my flour now. And I've already added my half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking powder, and my half a teaspoon of baking soda because our ratio for our flour is 2.5 cups of self-rising to 1/2 cup of all-purpose. And remember, we are using 1.5 cups of milk because we will be adding pudding into this recipe. And we are going to put in our pudding. And I am just using the regular 3-ounce bag, but we're not going to use it all. I'll put in maybe about 1/3 of that. And we are going to put our cakes in the oven. We'll bake them on 350 degrees. Our oven is already preheated. We're going to bake them for 25 minutes. If they're not done after 25 minutes, we are going to come back and set our timer for 5 more minutes. I'm going to lay my first layer, and you want to make sure that it is centered. Now, I will say this can get messy. It can, but if it does, it's perfectly fine. A few spoons on and just make sure it's soaked in really well. And I'm going to do the same thing with my milk. Now we'll start to put on our pineapples. And I just like to take a scoop or 2 and just kind of put them on. And we're going to use our butter knife just to smooth them out. I'm going to put a little more milk on, and I'll spread that out. Because I try to catch as much of the milk as I possibly can and just push it into the side of my cake. We are back. Our pineapple supreme cake has been chilling in the fridge overnight, and you all, it just looks so amazing. I'm going to go ahead and slice a small piece. As you can see, we have our 3-layer pineapple supreme cake, and it is so moist. Let's taste it. The pineapples plus the milk is awesome. If you make this recipe, when you make this recipe, do not forget to share your photos, your comments in the comment section. Let me know if you like the cake, if it was your first time trying the cake, if you tried it before, whatever it is, let me know. Remember, cooking is as easy or as hard as you make it, but if you keep it simple, just be yourself, life in itself can be so much easier. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Homemade. And until next time, continue to be great.